Welcome to this month's Stoos Sparks. In this program, Stoos Sparks, by the way, is a program where we just explore and exchange ideas in business innovation worldwide. So I'm excited today because we've got Kristian and Martin from Ugilic in Denmark, and we have Michael Gotha and from CRISP in Sweden, and James Priest from Sociocracy 3.0 in the UK. And we're going to be talking today about what happens when you step away from the old traditional notions about how you organize companies, which is typically when when you're small, it's easy, but when you get bigger, it stops being easy, and command and control takes over, and there's more bureaucracy. So there's companies that are really looking at how to engage your 100% of the talent you've got instead of losing the talent as you grow. And I think what we'll do is just jump into how these two companies are organizing themselves, what they're doing differently, what's happening, and then James is going to explain a little bit about the governance structure that sits behind some of these ideas, at least. So, Kristian, can I turn it over to you?
Thank you, Donna, and thank you for letting us join you tonight. So, yeah, I'm from you can say in Denmark, the new kid in class. We are called Ugilic. It means unbossed agile consultants. So there are three elements in that name. So we are unbossed. It means that it doesn't mean we don't have any bosses. It just basically means that everybody are bosses. And then we are agile consultants. So we have a common interest we're all from the agile community, and we are consultants. So basically we are building what we call the best home for the best consultants with a common agile mindset. So we help companies introduce agile and gain more from agile. I guess you can say become agile, but that's a big word. So yeah, one of the things that is special about Ugilic is that if you walked in the door, you wouldn't be able to tell who the CEO was. And by the way, we have a CEO because it's required by law in Denmark. And there are three people who paid the fee to get the company registered, and you wouldn't be able to tell who they were as well. So, and we just turned 6 months, and we're not the first ones to make a company like this, but in the consultancy business in Denmark, I think we are one of the first ones. And in short, all consultants choose their own work. They choose their own customers. They choose how much they want to work. They choose what the price should be. And basically, everybody are responsible for selling themselves, even though we help each other. So I usually say that we are a super team because for all of us, the alternatives of being in Ugilic is much worse. So we don't have any contracts. We have very few rules, and all initiatives are carried out by everybody in the company. It's very fun.
Now some might say, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, no, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, when you say you have no contracts, some might say does that mean you have no business?
Yeah, we have contracts with our customers if they want, and usually they do want that. So we make contracts, but within the company and all the consultants there, we have no contracts. So it's all based on trust. And we believe that it scales to 50, 100, 150 people, but we have no idea how to get there, which makes it very exciting. It's a great place to be.
That means you're learning a lot. Martin, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think the contract issue is pretty important. We want people to be part of the company because they want to be there, not because they're bound by some contract. They have to be there. Actually, we've just for the experiment, we said we will actually pay people to leave once they've started. So for the first 6 months, if people choose to leave, we'll offer them a bit of money to actually leave, just to make sure that people actually want to be there, and it's not an economic incentive to be there. And we haven't had to pay it yet, and I hope we won't have to, but it's just one of the things we're experimenting with.
That's a very interesting innovation. How big are you now?
We're 8 people now.
8 people now. So how do decisions get made?
Kristian, you want to?
Yeah, we call all initiatives in the company for projects. So there could be a sales project, there could be a new website project, there could be we want this customer project. And all projects need somebody to make sure that the project runs. I guess you can say a project manager, but that's not the right word to use. There's a project responsible, and everybody can become projects responsibles if they want to. And so we just form little groups whenever needed. And in a minute we're going to hear about Crisp. One of the things we have been inspired by is the way that Crisp makes decisions. So everybody can make suggestions for a decision, and we sit around a table. And if you do like this, it means you agree, go ahead. If you do like this, it means I need a little more information. If you do like this, it means no, I'm against this. I guess you can say I veto. And the fourth one is like this, and it means I don't necessarily agree, but I won't stand in the way of you guys doing this. And all decisions are made like that. And for now, it works perfectly.
Excellent. Excellent. Any challenges associated, or what kinds of challenges are you facing besides the whole growth question around how you grow and how you make this morph as you go? Any particular challenges that you've had to confront and get over?
I guess you can say when everything is based on people volunteering for stuff, sometimes there could be stuff that people are not volunteering for. So sometimes I guess you can say we forget stuff, and we have to remind each other. And who wants to do that? We look around the table. There's nobody to point the finger at. It's not written in any contracts. So trust and responsibility are big words when we are taking people on board.
Exactly. Okay. Thank you, Martin. Anything you want to add?
I think maybe sometimes when new people join the company, it's a big mouthful, the freedom they're actually given, and they're sort of going, really, I can do almost what I want, and I make it sound like anarchy. It's not, but I can choose my own clients and decide what I want to work on, and it's some getting used to that. It's your own responsibility to make sure that you have fulfilling work that you actually likes doing, and we believe if people choose work that they like and that they care about, not something that is forced on them they have to do, but something that they chose themselves, it's also a lot better deal for our client. They'll get a lot better consultant, a lot more motivated consultant out of it. So, but it takes some getting used to when we say, here's a blank piece of paper, you fill it out, and they go like, really? What's the catch? There is no catch. So that takes some getting used to.
We're actually doing
something. So I'm going to assume there are no form. Go ahead.
No, we're doing actually something that I think very few in the consultancy business, at least in Denmark, is doing, and that is we have no sales commissions. And for many of the larger companies, that's a big issue. I mean, people work to get money to a partner, and here, if I sell one of my colleagues at a client, it's not for it's not making any money for the company or making any money for me, and that's actually sometimes it's a great sales argument. So I'm not selling you this person in order to get money to our company. I'm selling you this person because I think he's the perfect fit between you and this person. He can add value to your company. Very few of the established companies on the market today in Denmark does that, and I think it's a great difference. It actually means a lot. So we don't have a sales office, and we don't have any economical structures. A very flat structure. Every year we want to, you can say, empty the chest of money and split it to all the consultants. So we hit zero again every year. We invite the customers to form our strategy for the next year, and this is what we call business agility. And that's a big difference.
Yeah, big difference. Very big difference. Michael, let's go to you now and learn about Crisp.
Yes. So I work at Crisp. We're a consultancy in Stockholm, Sweden. We're about 35 consultancy. We work with Agile as well, as Kristian talked about here. So we help companies get much closer customer collaboration, increase people engagement, and rapid learning. And we're 35 consultants, and that we can work on all the levels with the company. We can go in on the strategic level, management levels, and also we have some actual developers, so we can go in doing software development. And we're all really connected by the agile values and principles, so we can install that on the company, the customers we work with. And I got in contact with Ugilic here just recently, because what we did was that we decided to open source our whole model of working. The goal or the purpose of Crisp is to have happy consultants, and we think that if we focus on happiness for the consultants, that will spill over to the customers. We will have happy customers as well. And we think this is such a good model of working. We wanted to spread it. So a few years ago, there was a company in New Zealand contacting us and was inspired by us and setting up a kind of clone in New Zealand. And then recently there was another company in Gothenburg starting, and they wanted to know about how we were working. And then finally said that, oh, why don't we open source our whole model? So we published it on GitHub. So it's there. You can see it at dna.crisp.se, and we describe typically everything we do so that other companies can learn from it, and that we can learn from others that do the same. So,
excellent. And so now tell us more about the decision making and the hiring and the same kinds of things that Kristian and Martin have been talking about.
Yeah, so basically we do the same as Kristian. What we can add is that when it comes to recruiting, we don't have any purpose to grow. So, but we want to get some new consultants every year just to broaden our perspective, get new influences, and so on. So it's a quite long process to get accepted at Crisp. You have to have worked or know some of the consultants. So we typically bring in two persons a year, just for diversity, and then they enhance our competency. So, yeah, as Kristian said, there is no purpose to maximize profit in Crisp. Actually, we believe that the consultants who do the work should keep the profits, really. So Crisp itself work to minimize the profits. So there is kind of no money left at the end of the year. We share it. And also, when it comes to the CEO, actually in Sweden, you're not. You can run limited liability companies without the CEO. And a few years ago, we discovered that actually the function of the CEO could be distribute other functions, other roles. So the role of CEO we got rid of. We used to rotate the CEO, but from the last couple of years, we don't have a CEO.
Just get rid of him.
Yeah, we get rid of the CEO. So we are
That's when you know you've done your job. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So there's no hierarchy. There's no power over anyone. Anyone that wants to take a decision can drive that decision. We typically have kind of 4 levels of decision making. So, I mean, if it affects more or less myself or the customer I'm working with and so on, I just take the decision. If it involves a bit more of the consultants, I typically then take some input from them, and then I take the decision. The next level is that I actually take input and then make a proposal and get feedback on the proposal before I take the decision. And in case it affects the whole company, I would then bring it to the whole, and typically would then take the decisions when we all meet at a conference. But we can also drive it online if it's more urgent.
We have a It's very similar in Ugilic, and we have this little basic rule that says that if it feels wrong to take it without including the others, it probably is. You should consult the others. And we haven't made a single bad decision yet.
That's a great principle to use, though. It's a very clear principle.
You can decide whatever you want. It's up to you to take the responsibility, and people do.
Excellent. Now, Michael, any challenges? Go ahead.
I just want to make a comment on the CEO. I think it shows a lot about the reality we are living in, because the reason why and I'm so happy to hear that you have moved beyond this in Sweden. The only reason why you by law have to have a CEO in Denmark is to have someone to hold responsible if something goes wrong. So it's sort of who sits on the cannon, who should we be able to shoot or hang if we cheat the tax authorities or do some other stupid stuff. Then you need to hold one person accountable. So I think the whole society around us and the way that the laws are structured it's not really ready to embrace a model like this, where it's where we take responsibility together as a group and not as individuals sitting at the top in this pyramid game that we know from traditional companies.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah, it definitely disrupts the existing structures for sure.
Yeah.
Michael, do you want to speak to any challenges that that CRISP has faced and how you've overcome them, and then we'll go to James.
Yes. So quite recently we started to experiment and practice ourselves in conflict resolution. We don't really have any big conflicts at the moment. There have been some conflicts, and there's always something. And one disadvantage, you could say, if you don't have a manager, if there's a conflict, there's no one to escalate it to. There's no one that can just step in and, hey guys, this is how it is. So it requires each and every person to be highly skilled in communication and conflict resolution. And we've also now been experimenting with a kind of small process, some steps for dealing with conflict. And it basically is that, if you get some gravel in your shoe, it starts to hurt after a while, or some sand in your shoe, right? So if you have a gravel or even dust, you have to bring it up with the person involved immediately before it gets kind of bad. However, if you're not able to solve it with a person, the next step is to call in a mediator that both parties have confidence in. And that happened quite recently, that some persons called in a mediator and solved conflict, and it was a great experience. That, wow, this is really working. And in the worst case, if it gets bad, infected, we call it the moose head, and it's the metaphor for the elephant in the room that everyone sees, but no one wants to talk about. So in our case, it's an ugly, stinking moose head. And when we started with this experiment, with this process, we kind of tried to get up some old stuff, but but I think it's really fun and experimenting to practice. So that is a challenge. I think you have to have really high trust and openness, and you cannot trust on any manager or anyone coming in and solving the conflicts for you.
Yeah, so there's a higher level of personal responsibility involved, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think one challenge, if we start growing even more, one challenge would be the efficiency in decision making. Because now we use mainly consensus if we take decisions affecting everyone, and that works really well at the moment because we don't have any critical decisions and not too many decisions. But the challenge in the future, if we were to grow more and so on, could be the effectiveness, and that's also a lot why we're looking to sociocracy for potentially being more effective in decision making.
That's a very nice way of introducing James. Perhaps you could do that now.
Yes, so I've been studying and learning as much as I can about sociocracy and also holacracy. I'm really impressed by them, and I think a little more than a year ago I met James Priest here, so that I have with me, trying to learn everything I can about sociocracy, and we're actually running some courses together now. And James, yeah, you have been experimenting also and picking up sociocracy to a new level.
Okay, well, hey, Donna and everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you, and I'm enjoying the conversation. I'm going to try and achieve the impossible, because I know we have a short time frame, but just to give a brief overview, because I imagine for many people, sociocracy is a new word on their ears. Just to give a bit of background about me, I'm a freelance consultant. I've been consulting and offering training and facilitation for about 15 years now. And interestingly, in the context of this conversation, I came to sociocracy and governance via working around conflict. So psychotherapeutic background, working a lot with individuals, groups, young people, couples, and so on, around navigating conflict. And at some point, it dawned on me that 90% of conflict came about through just the inability to actually make decisions together and to organize together. And I was kind of interested about this, and at the same time, about 14 years ago, was introduced to this term sociocracy. In the same sentence as I was introduced to a process called non-violent communication, which is another interest of mine. And so I was implored at the time to learn about this methodology and apply it in a community with a residential centre attached back in the early 2000s, because they were at war with each other. And it was very interesting because this community was a center for right relationship and personal planetary transformation. It was a very high aspiring vision they had, and they were infighting and really to the point of physical violence. So it was quite a paradox. And this got me thinking, why is it that well-meaning people end up with such tension? And actually, if I look at the kind of conventional business models, even though the majority of people aren't so happy in them, they're actually quite effective, and that's very interesting in itself. And an observation is that as groups of people kind of evolve a more pluralistic perspective and a more egalitarian worldview, then in many cases, especially in complex environments, then they can run into a lot of problems because they try to create this flatness and consensus environment. And whilst it's effective in high trust groups like CRISP, for example, Ugilic, level of trust together. If you start to apply the principles of consensus into complex organizational systems, then it really starts to break down, mainly because you don't have the time. So maybe I could say something about sociocracy, Lorna, just to give a
Please do,
overview.
yeah. Please explain, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so the name sociocracy, socio comes from the Latin socius, and that translates as companion or friend, and klassi from the ancient Greek, which is about, I'll just check so I get my interpretation right, kratos, the power, rule. So it's really about power or rule by the companions or friends. It's different to demos, you know, rule by the general mass of people with voting privileges. So this term was first coined by Auguste Comte in 1851, and he foresaw a future kind of scientific establishment. So you can make your own assumptions about that. But fortunately, then a little later, Lester Frank Ward came up, or sort of redefined sociocracy and described it as the rule of people with a relationship to each other. So it's kind of the rule by the social group. So sociocracy has gone through various iterations in the early 1900s with an educationist, Case Booker. And then eventually in the 70s landed with Gerard Endenberg of the Endenberg Elektrotechnik, and he implemented it into his electrical company with great success. They turned around a near disaster in the middle of the biggest economic crisis that the Netherlands has faced, and within 6 months were turning away work. It was such an effective solution they came up with. And basically what they did is they created bottomarchy within their organization. So they found a way to tap collective intelligence throughout the whole system, and by doing so they were able to create more resilient decisions and come up with innovation around dealing with this economic crisis, and they've been thriving ever since. So they were really a case study for sociocracy, and up until the late 1990s, sociocracy was very much rooted in the Netherlands, is recognized now. You can incorporate as a sociocracy in the Netherlands. And it was actually ruled that sociocracies didn't need a union, yeah, because it created such equivalence. So, since the late 90s, early 2000s, sociocracy began to migrate a little into the English-speaking world, and then a guy, John Buck, co-authored a book with Sharon Valline's We the People in 2007, and this really catapulted it into the English-speaking world and then back into many other languages. So that's a bit of history. I'm sure many of the listeners have heard of holacracy also. Brian Robertson, who developed holacracy, was inspired early on with sociocracy, and then he took that methodology and he synthesized it with a lot of other modalities, and he's created a very kind of whole system application that you can upload into your organization, and it takes care of everything: governance, decision making, operations, and so on. And I think this is the distinction between holacracy and sociocracy. It's very much it's a whole system governance methodology, but its focus is very much on governance, not so much on operations. I'll just pause a moment, see if you want to come in there.
No, thank you. That's but if you could speak directly to how it applies, like in the case of both Crisp and Ugilic, how exactly can companies benefit from sociocracy in scale, even, as they're growing? How does it adapt in size, so to speak?
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's some core values that go with sociocracy. One of them is equivalence, and this is about giving people a voice in the decisions that affect them. So we heard Kristian mentioning about this in Ugilic. It's is this a decision that I should mention to anybody else? Does it affect other people? This is core in sociocracy. So if we're making decisions, that will have a voice in those decisions. Transparency is very important, and also a focus on effectiveness. And this, I think, is where we start to see the difference between what we call consensus and in sociocracy the principle of consent. Because if you just give unlimited equivalence, people voice in all the decisions that affect them, that can hinder effectiveness. So the way that sociocracy gets around this is with this consent principle. And I think one way to understand what the difference is between the decision-making aspect of sociocracy and consensus is, in consent decision-making, we're deliberately seeking objection. Focus isn't so much, can I agree to this? The question is, do I see a reason why doing this is going to harm us somehow? So we all become bound within an organization to speak out our tensions. And in holacracy, Brian made this more explicit. He spoke about tensions, and I think this is a great concept, that the people within organization are like the nerve endings. We're picking up changes in environment, and this gives feedback to when there's a need for some kind of response, and then we can formulate policy around it. So this is a bit of a paradigm shift for people, because a lot of us have learned in certain contexts to sit on our objections, because it can be problematic, it can lead to isolation, and there's a lot of early childhood and later trauma that goes with that. So it requires a bit of a reset to consider this possibility that behind all perceived problems and challenges and difficulties we're facing is wisdom seeking emergence into the consciousness of the organization. So I think this is one of the fundamentals of both sociocracy and holacracy. I'd just like to say that I think sociocracy is, how do people align? Well, in sociocracy, people align towards vision, and they gather around aims, which is like the products and services. Brian, with holacracy, he suggested that the thing about being vision focused is we can lose our focus on purpose sometimes, and maybe project what the organization should look like in the future, rather than discovering more the organization that wants to emerge. There's a number of sociocrats who would disagree with that and say that's a simplistic interpretation, but the point was Brian made it more explicit by making purpose the focus. So he said, let's focus on our purpose and discover through process intentions the organization that wants to emerge. And you mentioned at the start there 3.0. Well, Sociocracy 3.0, this is a kind of a pre-launch conversation because we haven't formalized this yet with the world. But myself and a colleague, Bernard Bockelbrink, out of Berlin, and Mikael in the background, and a few other consultants around the world have been gathering together to really process some of the tensions we found with holacracy and with sociocracy, the sociocratic method. And And 3.0 isn't so much a concept that we've created, it's much more a discovery through diving into these tensions. And I think we could capture the essence of it very simply. Tensions were dependent on people's values. So what matters to me and what touches me may not matter to you and touch you, and what's behind that is our values and the frame through which we interpret the world around us. And also we saw that behind vision and behind purpose is need. And actually all human action, including every sentence I'm saying now, is driven by a need. And so the language I'm using now, or the strategies that organizations apply, are all focused towards satisfying need in one way or another. So what we said in 3.0 is, well, rather than focus on vision or purpose, let's actually go right to the source. We'll focus on need. So every time there's a tension, we evaluate the current reality and we look at the needs associated with it, establish if it fits with it, and act to respond to that, either through creating policy, making decisions together, creating roles, new circles, and so on. So 3.0 is a kind of, I wouldn't say it's an evolution, but you can kind of lay it straight over the top of a holacracy or a sociocracy, and bring the focus to the essence of what we're all doing together as human beings all the time, which is very much around addressing need. And by doing that, we can maximize the flow of value in the direction that we need, and also can see when the job's done. Because if the need is satisfied, then there's no need to continue to exist. And I wonder how many organizations would justify their current iteration, if they really stood back and considered the needs that they were addressing. So, and maybe one more thing to mention, that purpose becomes implicit with 3.0, and the purpose is to satisfy need.
Okay, Kristian, you have a question.
Yes, as I understand, James, this way of working, or this way of organizing yourself and making decisions, I have a feeling that it is emergent, it's growing. To me, I would think that it is more something that small companies do when they start up, as in our case, Ugilic, it was kind of born into our DNA. Or do you see kind of transformation projects for larger companies? Because I think this is, for many existing and larger companies, this will be almost more than a revolution of changing the existing power structures. I mean, do companies do that? Is it possible?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm working with all scales in all sectors right now, including some international networks, not corporate networks, mind you, but nonetheless large scale. So you can scale this to any kind of size. I think there's a lot of vulnerability sometimes, and it was a question that you posed to me, I think, in our preparation for the conversation, Donna, was overwhelming temptation to conclude that if you aren't managing by command and control, then chaos reigns. Yeah. And I think this is a really justified concern, actually. And I call this radical egalitarianism. It's kind of when people are acting out of their wound of command control paradigm, and so they want to make everything flat, and but some things get lost in this, and that's really the issue around leadership and the issue around some kind of functional hierarchy at times. So I think if I'm consulting with senior management or CEO and they have vulnerabilities around adapting more towards a sociocratic perspective, then I find the most valuable thing, first of all, to do is to recognize them and the kind of driver, the current reality and the needs they're taking care of. Because oftentimes there's just a doubt in the capacity for any alternative that will guarantee that these concerns are taken care of. And so if you focus on the tensions, then you discover issues within the current reality and needs associated with it, including the tension I have as a senior manager around making some kind of alternative approach to governance within the organization. So this leads us directly to the needs that these roles are serving. If you make these explicit, then you can back up and reconsider your strategy, which previously was to have a senior executive handle it, for example, to dealing with these needs. And so if you can do this and make it explicit and also honor the value that people bring in the current iteration, then it brings a lot of relaxation into the possibility of an alternative approach. And one of the arguments, of course, for an alternative approach is we're increasingly engaging complexity. And micromanagement, top-down management, just does not handle it anymore. We create another tier of management to manage the managers managing the managers, and it just becomes more and more complex. So we're really invited at this stage to distribute leadership, distribute autonomy, but to do it within a context where it remains safe. And so as long as we're clear around the limits of autonomy and the kind of the needs that individuals or groups are focused on serving, then we can bring safety into the organization, and this can scale to any size.
Excellent. Excellent.
So Sociocracy can bring that kind of structure and support. It's not removing just hierarchy or command and the chain, command of chain, and so on. You need some structure. Sociocracy is one way, and holacracy as well, to build that structure in.
Yeah, it's almost a way of gaining control by giving it away, in the sense that you're giving greater freedom and autonomy, but you still have structures in place that allow you to work with what exists.
Exactly, Donna. And that people then have a sense of stewardship, of ownership of the organization. If you give people a voice in forming decisions and making the policy around their work and their areas of focus, then they take much more accountability for those decisions and evolving them and evaluating them and so on. So you really generate an environment of stakeholders, rather than kind of owners and workers, where everybody is aligned towards serving the evolution of the system.
Right. Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. I'd like to, offline, we'll talk more about, because my experience in my work is about taking conflict and using it to strengthen the creativity, because quite frequently conflict is an expression, yes, of conflicting values, but also of the wider container, just the context that you're in. So sometimes if you widen it, shift it, you can work with it differently and turn it into a real ally, which most, their traditional business decision-making thinks about conflict as something you need to fix, as opposed to something you can use to leverage talent and contribution and knowledge. So, but we can talk about that later. I want to go back to both Michael and to Kristian and Martin and ask you if there was anything that you would advise companies who are looking at sociocracy or holacracy or any of the self-organizing, or even doing your own version of it, making up your own version of it, any of the sort of self-organizing concepts and ideas. What would you recommend they be aware of and or consider in their decision to embark on this grand experiment of self-organizing companies? Any particular bits of advice you'd give?
That's a tough question. One line that we came up with doing the, I guess you can say the vision or the handbook or the manifest for Ugilic is, it's all about the people. At the end of the day, nothing else matters. And I heard that Michael says something about economical growth. We don't have an ambition of growing economically either. So what we do is we take extra care of bringing in the right people. So we do want to grow, but we do want to do it slowly. And I really think that if you get the right people on board the bus, then much is gained there. So if you are growing just for the sake of growth and to make more money and to become bigger, then I think it's going to be harder. But if you focus on this and sociocracy and you need things to work within the people, and you don't take on people who doesn't fit into that. I think maybe that's one of the answers, but it's easy for us to say because we are not that many yet, but we are very focused on this.
Okay, Martin.
Yeah, to add on. Okay.
Yeah, I think the right people, and that's easy to say, and maybe you don't know it until they've joined the company or much later whether that was the right people. I think one of the things that, apart from the right people, which is also part of the Agile Manifesto, so it's sort of deeply rooted in us that people are really important. I think another Agile concept that we have sort of taken our own medicine is realizing, confronting, and making transparent that we don't know how the end looks. So we are trying to make the journey something that we do together and make the decisions we take transparent. So as Kristian talked about, we have this reset of the company yearly where we invite in for 3 days partners, clients, people, to give us feedback on how we're doing and how they sort of see collaborating with us and working with us and giving us advice. And we sort of put all the project responsibilities that Kristian talked about that can be taking care of the financials, or it can be any other project. We sort of lay those at the door, hang that at the door, and we sort of iron out a new, start with a blank piece of paper and iron out a new strategy for the next year, and then we do it all over again. So it's sort of we do it 1 year at a time, and we have no idea where we're going to end up, but we have a goal of where we want to go. We want to make this home for the best consultants, and we want people to take part in that journey and make it transparent to the people who are on board, so they can influence. They need to know what's going on in the company to actually be able to sort of help steward the journey together with the rest of us.
It's the epitome of what Rod calls iterate, one step at a time, co-create. It's that constant process. So, Michael, over to you. Your turn.
Yeah,
thank you.
I would say like CRISP is a whole experiment by itself. So we do lots of experimentation, iterations, trying out things, adopting. So yeah, if you're fine with experimenting your way forward, so to say, and also I think being clear about your values. Like, do you value equivalence, openness, transparency, freedom? Then you need a model that fits your values. And then as also we talked about the emerging purpose or the need behind, be clear about that. And then you can iterate your way forward with small experiments and just evaluate. And then, yeah, take ideas from others, but you need to create your own model. And your context is different, and the world is changing so fast in this complex environment anyway, so you cannot just copy anyone else. You need to experiment your way forward.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, I'd like to thank each of you, and James, thank you for stepping in on the Sociocracy conversation. Appreciate it. So thank you each for participating today and for joining us in this webinar. I know there's going to be people that are interested in this as we share it. One of the things that I'm particularly impressed by is that you meet companies that talk about being agile, but they aren't, and they're far from it. And so I really appreciate the steps that both companies and the work they're doing, also James, but that both of you are just continuing to stay in curiosity, to keep open, to keep moving, to keep accommodating. It's just a brilliant approach. So thanks again for being on Stoos Sparks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.